Now, let's look at the constitutional development of within Pakistan. Right, so this is going to be a long one, so buckle up. In 1956 constitution, they had strong Islamic overtones. It mandated the state to make policies for Muslim unity and international policy. Article 24, and for the facilitation of an Islamic way of life, which was Article 25. Though it clarified that these requirements were only principles of policy and could not be enforced through the courts. It also stipulated that only a Muslim may be appointed as president, Article 32, and barred the enactment of laws repugnant to the injunctions of Islam, Article 198. Beneath these overtones, however, the constitution largely retained the legislative and executive infrastructure and nomenclature of the Government of India Act 1935. Other notable points: 300 members of parliament with 40% seats to Punjab and 10 seats reserved for women, and Urdu and Bengali as official languages, but English to be used for first 20 years. Also to note, obviously, and these points, Bangladesh was still part of Pakistan as East Pakistan up till 1970-1971 when the war happened and they separated to becoming Bangladesh. The 1962 constitution, after the 1956 constitution, there was another constitution, 1962 constitution, largely reproduced the Islamic provisions of the 1956 constitution with two important exceptions. First, it relegated the provision barring the enactments of laws repugnant to the injunctions of Islam to a principle of policy, thereby making it unenforceable, Article 1A of Principles of Policy. And second, it introduced an advisory council of Islamic ideology with the mandate to recommend appropriate Islamic laws and policies to the government and legislature, Articles 199 up till Article 206. So there's a bit of contradiction where they don't want Islam to enter into the law, but also created a separate council, or asking to separate a separate council, create a separate council which can inform on the main law according to Islam. This 1962 constitution never was enacted in full because there was a lot of political upheaval that happened during that time as well within Pakistan, with the whole war happening in the middle. Also several martial laws. There have been a lot of martial laws within Pakistan. We come then to the 1973 constitution, which is the current constitution on Pakistan. It was, as it was originally formulated, made some important advances towards Islamization. Now, this is the constitution that would have taken place after General Zia has taken over, put martial law in, and has taken over Pakistan. And he is the one who introduced Islamization. So, it declared Islam to be the state religion for the first time. In 1973, Islam was declared as the state religion, Article 2. It reinstated the injunction barring the enactment of laws repugnant to Islam as an enforceable provision, Article 227. And most importantly, proposed a new Council of Islamic Ideology, Articles 228 to 231, which drew its members from the superior judiciary as well as Islamic scholars, thereby for the first time creating a bridge between the secular and Islamic legal values. There was a Hudud Ordinance that was introduced. Hudud Ordinance was a replacement of parts of Pakistan Penal Code. The ordinance added new criminal offences of adultery and fornication to Pakistani laws, and new punishments of whipping, amputation, and stoning to death, which are the Islamic punishments. But obviously, because Pakistan was on Pakistan Penal Code, which was based on English common law, these punishments were not there before. For theft or robbery, the Pakistan Penal Code punishments of imprisonment or fine or both were replaced by amputation of the right hand of the offender for theft and amputation of the right hand and left foot for robbery. For zina, extramarital sex, the provisions relating to adultery were replaced by the ordinance with punishment of flogging 100 lashes for those unmarried offenders and stoning to death for married offenders. All these hudud punishments were the maximum punishments dependent on hud proof for Muslim men of good repute testifying as witness to the crime being met. The incarceration of thousands of rape victims on charges of zina has been the most worrying though. It has been difficult to merge Pakistan Penal Code and Sharia because of the differences in the underlying logic of the two legal systems. As I've mentioned before, one has English common law as basis and the other Islam. In 1980 till 82 and 1989, it saw ordinances introduced for blasphemy laws. And these are the first time the blasphemy laws are being introduced because obviously the door of Sharia has been opened and this is what happens, including against Ahmadi people, that if the Ahmadi people, which is a sect within Islam, if they claim to be Muslims and were preaching their form of religion, posing as Muslims, they would be punished 3 years of imprisonment, defiling Quran, life imprisonment, derogatory remarks against Prophet, mandatory death. Prior to 1986, only 14 cases pertaining to blasphemy were reported in Pakistan. From 1987 to 2014, over 1,300 people have been accused of blasphemy, mostly non-Muslim religious minorities. So you can see the jump because of the Islamization of Pakistan. Sharia was declared the supreme law of Pakistan in 1991. Enforcement of Sharia Act. Section 4 stipulates that courts select an interpretation of law consistent with Islamic jurisprudence and principles. The Federal Sharia Court was formed to judge the conformity of Pakistani laws with Islam according to the Quran and Sunnah. It consists of 8 judges, including 3 ulama who are required to be qualified in Sharia. Pakistani evidence law has been brought into conformity with Sharia. However, only 9 sections needed to be changed from the British era 1872 Evidence Act. The law of evidence also requires a court to determine competence to offer witness by reference to the Islamic injunction in the Quran and Sunnah. Qisas and Diyat laws prescribe retaliatory punishments or compensatory blood money for offences such as murder and injury. The Qisas and Diyat laws in Pakistan make offences such as murder a private offence against the victim and their family, instead of classifying them as a public offence against the state as it had been during the British rule, who had abandoned the Qisas and Diyat laws because they made enforcing law and order difficult, since the victim or the victim's family could pardon or take blood money as compensation. They got enshrined into law in 1997. Punishment for apostasy have been effectuated through Pakistan's blasphemy laws. In 2006, the government sent a bill to the Parliamentary Committee for consideration, which would impose the death penalty on apostates. Which is why at that point was the time when I started thinking that it's time to go, and 4 years later I did go. The emphasis on Islam has meant that certain laws, like the Domestic Violence Bill of 2020, could not be passed due to opposition from religious political parties and the Council for Islamic Ideology. And conversely, certain other laws, such as the blasphemy laws from Ziaul Haq's time, could not be repealed despite repeated calls from civil society. However, it did not mean that all laws enacted by the federal or provincial legislatures prioritized the views of Islamic parties or the council. Most recently, the Transgender Persons Act 2018 and the Punjab Protection of Women Against Violence Act 2016 were challenged before the FSC for being contrary to the injunctions of Islam. There is also a third category of people who have taken it upon themselves to uphold what they consider to be the sanctity of Islam. This has resulted in increasing religious vigilantism, which, despite its overt religious fervor, is often simply a ruse for settling personal scores. While blasphemy accusations usually target persons belonging to Pakistan's religious minorities or the lowest rungs of its very stratified society, it has not spared its elite. For example, the 2011 murder of Governor of Punjab Salman Taseer at the hands of his security guard was particularly shocking. Even more shocking perhaps was the reverence afforded to his murderer as he was sentenced to death by the Supreme Court. So that was a bit of a snapshot of the legal landscape of Pakistan and how it has changed, and should also show you why all Pakistanis are not the same, and we can't just consider them all the same, because a lot of Pakistanis within Pakistan are trying to fight this Islamization for a very long time, but it feels like losing battle since it has been incorporated into Pakistan more and more and more. Now, before we end this microscopic